When I woke up, the first thing I saw was light, bright, cold, and almost blinding. The air smelled of disinfectant, and there was this faint beeping sound that echoed through my skull. I tried to move, but my arm felt heavy, wrapped in something tight. My throat burned when I whispered, Where am I?" A nurse turned quickly, her eyes widening in surprise. "You're awake. Don't move too much. You've been unconscious for days." "Days?" Her words spun around in my head like a storm. My chest ached, my ribs screamed, and my mind blank. I tried to remember what happened. Nothing came. "Can I see my parents?" I asked, my voice cracking. She hesitated. "They were here when you were brought in, but they haven't returned yet." Something about the way she said it didn't feel right, like she was holding back. A few hours later, a doctor came in. He had this kind face, but eyes that looked tired. "You're lucky to be alive," he said softly. "You were in a severe accident, but you'll make it." I wanted to believe him. But when I looked around, no flowers, no familiar faces, nothing that said home. 2 days passed. No one came. Not my mom, not my dad, not even a message. Nurses avoided my questions. The silence became heavier than the pain. Then, on the 3rd day, I overheard something. 2 nurses near the hallway. His parents left a fake number. One whispered. Police tried contacting them. Nothing came up. It's like they disappeared. My heart sank. I wasn't just abandoned. I was erased. When the officer finally walked in, he looked at me like he'd seen a ghost. "Son," he began carefully, "we need to ask you a few questions about your family." I nodded weakly. "Okay, what about them?" He paused, exchanged a look with the doctor, then asked, "Do you remember your full name?" "Of course," I said, frowning. "It's Daniel Cross." He opened a folder slowly and placed a photograph on the tray beside my bed. An old, faded picture of a toddler smiling between 2 strangers. "Daniel," he said, his tone trembling, "according to our records, you're not Daniel Cross. You're a missing child taken 30 years ago." The room froze. The air disappeared from my lungs. My entire life, every face, every memory, suddenly didn't belong to me anymore. Where are you watching from right now? This story is just beginning, and trust me, it's about to get darker, deeper, and far more shocking. Stay with me till the end. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss what happens next. The room felt smaller after the officer's words. I stared at that old photograph. The baby's eyes, the small smile, and for some strange reason my chest tightened. It was like something deep inside me recognized it. I forced a weak laugh. "That's impossible. I know who I am. My parents." The officer interrupted gently. "We checked every record connected to the names you gave us. Your birth certificate, your ID, even your medical insurance. All fabricated. None of it exists in the national database." I blinked. "You mean fake?" He nodded slowly. "Whoever raised you wasn't your real family, son." My world began to crumble. I remembered birthdays, arguments, my dad teaching me to drive, my mom's voice calling me for dinner. Were all those moments just lies wrapped in love? I tried to fight it. No, they couldn't do that. They loved me. But the silence that followed made it worse. The officer continued, "There was a kidnapping case in 1995. A 2-year-old boy taken from a park, while his mother looked away for a second. His name was Ethan Miles. That name, it hit me like a whisper from another life. He showed me another photo, a woman, her face aged, eyes hollow but hopeful. This is her. She never stopped looking for you." My heartbeat stumbled. "She's still alive?" "Yes," he said softly. "And she's on her way here." I didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. My parents, or the people I thought were my parents, had vanished. Now, a stranger was coming, claiming I was her long-lost child. The nurse came in to adjust my four, her eyes kind but heavy. "You're very brave," she whispered. "Not everyone could handle something like this." I didn't feel brave. I felt hollow. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me flinch. The fluorescent light hummed above me, and I kept staring at my reflection in the glass window, wondering who I really was. Then, just past midnight, I heard voices outside my door. A woman's cry. When the door opened, she stepped in, trembling, her eyes wet. The moment she saw me, she froze. Her hands covered her mouth, and a sob escaped. "Ethan," she whispered, "my baby." I didn't know how to react. Every instinct told me to back away. She was a stranger, but something inside me cracked open. Her voice, her face, even the way she said my name, it all felt familiar, like a dream I'd forgotten. I don't remember you," I said quietly. She nodded, tears falling. "You were too young when they took you." But I never stopped looking. Never. The officer watched silently, giving us space. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a small object, a broken silver bracelet. "This was yours," she said. "It has your initials, Yem." I looked at it closely, and for a brief second, an image flashed in my mind. Sunlight, a park, laughter, and then darkness. My hands began to shake. "I remember something," I whispered. "A balloon, a man in a brown coat." Her breath caught. "That was the day you were taken." And just like that, every wall I had built around my past began to collapse. For the next few days, the hospital became a place where reality and confusion walked hand in hand. My supposed mother, the woman who raised me, was nowhere to be found. Her phone disconnected, her workplace abandoned. My father had quit his job the same week of the accident. It was as if they vanished from the face of the earth. The police ran background checks, searched abandoned houses, old addresses. Nothing. Meanwhile, the woman who called herself my real mother stayed close. Her name was Margaret Miles. She refused to leave my side. Every time I woke up, she'd be there, holding that same broken bracelet, whispering prayers under her breath. Sometimes she'd smile and tell stories about a little boy who used to laugh so hard he'd hiccup. Sometimes she'd just sit silently, staring at me, her eyes full of both love and sorrow. But as I listened, a new fear started to grow. If the people who raised me had lied about everything, who were they really? Detectives began piecing things together. They discovered old photographs hidden in our former home. Pictures of me at different ages, but with no school photos, no certificates, no official records. My childhood had been erased. Then, something stranger appeared, a folder labeled Project Eden. Inside were notes, hospital documents, and signatures that didn't belong to my parents. The lead detective, Ramirez, explained it to me gently. "Daniel, or Ethan," he corrected himself. "This wasn't a random kidnapping. It might have been part of something bigger." I frowned. "Bigger? Like what?" He sighed. "Human identity laundering. Back in the late 90s, certain groups sold abducted children under fake identities. Sometimes for adoption, sometimes for darker reasons. It's possible your parents bought you under a false record." My chest tightened. "They bought me?" He nodded grimly. "Or someone sold you to them. We don't know yet." Margaret broke into tears. "He was my only child. They took him from me, and I thought he was dead for 30 years. I didn't know how to comfort her. I didn't even know how to comfort myself. That night, as she slept in the chair beside my bed, I stared at her hand clutching the bracelet. That small piece of silver felt heavier than anything I'd ever touched. It carried truth and pain. A nurse walked in quietly. "You're lucky," she whispered. "Most people never find out who they really are." I looked at her, my voice trembling. "Yeah, but sometimes I wish I didn't. Because knowing the truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it just builds a new kind of prison." The next morning, the police returned. They had found something, an abandoned storage unit registered under the fake names of my adoptive parents. Inside, they found boxes filled with documents, birth records, and hundreds of photographs of children. My name wasn't the only one. Detective Ramirez showed me one picture in particular. A boy about my age, same smile, same haircut. But written on the back were the words, Eden02 transferred. Transferred to where? And why was I labeled Eden01? When I asked the detective what it meant, his face turned pale. "We think there were others like you. Kids who were taken and given new identities. You may not have been the only one." My heart pounded as I realized this wasn't just about my past anymore. It was about dozens of stolen lives and the people who built entire families out of lies. What would you do if you discovered the people who raised you weren't your family, but your captors? Stay with me, because the shocking truth about who was behind the kidnappings and why they chose him is finally revealed. Days turned into weeks, but the questions only multiplied. I was recovering physically, but inside, I was breaking apart. Every memory I had, every laugh, every hug, every I love you, felt poisoned by doubt. Who were those people that raised me? Were they victims too, or architects of something evil? Detective Ramirez came back one morning with a folder. So thick, it looked like it carried the weight of every missing child in the country. He placed it on my bedside table and said, "You need to see this." Inside were scanned records, coded numbers, and faded photographs. Dozens of children, each file marked with an identifier. Eden, 01, Eden, 02, Eden, 03, all the way to Eden 42. 42 children, Ramirez said quietly, all stolen over a period of 10 years. Most of them were never found. You were the first, the prototype, according to these documents. I flipped through the papers, my hands trembling. There were scientific notes, psychological assessments, and medical data tied to every child. It didn't make sense. What does this even mean? Why were we numbered? Ramirez took a deep breath. Project Eden was an experimental program run by a rogue group, part of a now-defunct private medical organization. Their goal was to study genetic resilience. They believed certain children, taken at random, could be molded into what they called adaptive humans. I blinked, stunned. You mean they experimented on us? In some cases, he said carefully, but it seems your abductors might have pulled you out before the program was shut down. Whoever took you, they may have been trying to protect you or profit from you. The word profit echoed in my head like a curse. So they didn't just steal children, I whispered. They sold them. He nodded. To families who could afford to cover the trail. I looked down at my hands. Every scar, every freckle suddenly felt foreign. I wasn't just a victim of love gone wrong. I was a product of someone's business. Margaret, my real mother, was standing at the door, silently crying. She came closer and said softly, "They can never erase who you really are. You were born from love, Ethan, not from them." Her words were supposed to comfort me, but they only made the ache worse. Because how could I be born from love when my entire existence was stolen? That night, I found myself alone again. The hospital lights dimmed, the hallways quiet. I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed everything, the accident, the abandonment, the revelation. Then the door creaked. Detective Ramirez entered quietly. "Ethan," he said, "we found something new." He handed me a black USB drive sealed in a small evidence bag. It was hidden inside one of the storage boxes. The label says Miles' origin restricted. My mother's last name. I hesitated. "What's on it?" "We haven't opened it yet. It's encrypted, but whatever's inside, it's about you." He placed it on the table and left. I stared at that small piece of plastic for hours, wondering what truths it might unleash, and if I was ready to face them. By morning, a tech team decrypted the files. Inside were hospital records from 1993, 2 years before I was born. The documents revealed a shocking pattern. Margaret Miles had once been part of the same medical institution behind Project Eden. When the detective confronted her, she didn't deny it. "I was a researcher," she confessed through tears. "We were told we were studying child immunity, not kidnapping them. When I discovered what they were doing, I tried to expose it. That's when they took my son." Her voice broke on the last word. "I became a threat, Ethan. They silenced everyone who tried to speak. The day you disappeared, I knew it wasn't random. They were punishing me. My body went numb. The people who took me didn't just steal me. They targeted me to destroy her." Ramirez placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We're reopening the case under federal jurisdiction. Those responsible will face justice. But for me, justice didn't bring peace. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes, cold rooms, bright lights, and whispers I couldn't understand. Were those real memories? Or was my mind playing tricks? One night, I decided to confront my past directly. I asked Ramirez to take me to the storage unit where the files were found. He hesitated, but eventually agreed. When we arrived, the air was stale, the lights flickered weakly, boxes piled to the ceiling, labeled with codes and numbers. I walked among them slowly, feeling the weight of 42 stolen lives. Then, in the far corner, I found something that froze my heart. A small photo frame. A baby boy, maybe a year old, with the same bracelet I now wore. But in the corner of the frame were the initials AM. Not EM, AM. I called Ramirez over. This isn't me. He squinted. No, it's not that's another child. He flipped the photo over. Scribbled on the back were the words, Eden 00, origin sample. 0. I muttered, there was another before me? He nodded slowly. The project didn't start with you. It started with him. And according to the next document we found, Eden 00 was never found. This was no longer just about finding my truth. It was about exposing what they'd done to all of us. Because if one of them was still alive, they might know why the others vanished, and why my fake parents suddenly disappeared the moment I woke up. This story is not just a mystery. It's a fight for stolen identity, for justice, and for truth buried under 30 years of lies. Stay with me till the end, because Ethan discovers what really happened to Eden 00, and who's been watching him since the day he opened his eyes in that ICU. The rain that night came like punishment, hard, cold, relentless. It drummed on the car roof as Detective Ramirez drove us back from the storage site. Neither of us said a word. The silence between us was heavy with unanswered questions. When we reached the hospital, I stared out the window for a long time before speaking. Detective, if there was an Eden 00, what happened to him? Ramirez hesitated. We don't know, but according to the earliest records, Eden 00 was the first child taken, the foundation of the entire project. They called him the control sample. I frowned. Control sample for what? He sighed, rubbing his temples. They were testing early methods of memory conditioning, trying to see how much of a child's identity could be rewritten if they were separated young enough. The words made my stomach twist. So you're saying they erase his memories? Or tried to? We believe they use hypnosis, medication, and trauma as tools to reset identity. You were probably taken after the experiments went dark. You were the first clean adoption, not a test subject. Clean adoption. That phrase burned in my mind. There was nothing clean about what had been done to me. When I returned to my hospital room, my mother, Margaret, was asleep again in that same chair, her head resting against the wall, clutching the bracelet like a relic of faith. I sat quietly, watching her breathe. I couldn't stop thinking about that photograph, the one labeled Eden 00. That boy's eyes looked like mine. The same sharpness, the same sadness. And somewhere deep down, something told me he was still out there. The next morning, I demanded access to the full case file. Ramirez tried to dissuade me. Ethan, you're still recovering. Some of this information is... I need to know. I cut him off. If I'm ever going to live again, I need the truth. He studied my face for a long moment, then finally handed me a file marked Eden Confidential Archive. Inside were several black and white photos, each showing a group of scientists in lab coats. In the center of one picture stood a man with cold, intelligent eyes and a distinct scar across his cheek. The caption beneath read, Dr. Harold Crane, lead researcher, Project Eden. Ramirez explained quietly. He disappeared in 1999 after a federal raid. Some say he fled the country, others that he kept the project alive underground. I stared at Crane's photo, memorizing every feature. That face felt familiar, like I'd seen it somewhere. Not in reality, but in the hazy flashes that haunted my sleep. Then came the chilling part. At the bottom of the file, there was a hand-signed note from Crane himself. Subject Eden, 00 demonstrates adaptive neurological response. Subject will be relocated to an alternate site for enhanced cognitive training. Potential asset confirmed. Alternate site? I asked, where was that? Ramirez flipped through the next document. No location, just coordinates, and they point to a decommissioned facility outside the city, closed for decades. I sat back, my pulse quickening. Then that's where we'll find him. Ramirez looked uneasy. Ethan, this isn't a movie. If Crane's still operating, it could be dangerous. I met his eyes. You think I care about danger after 30 years of living someone else's life? He didn't argue after that. 2 nights later, we went. The building sat deep in the woods, gray, forgotten, swallowed by vines and silence. As we stepped inside, the smell of mold and rust filled the air. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing rooms lined with old equipment and empty cages. On the walls were faded posters with slogans like "Perfection through Evolution." I felt sick. In one room, we found rows of metal beds. Beside them, small toys, dusty, untouched for decades. I picked up a wooden airplane and felt my chest tighten. It was the same kind my fake father used to car when I was little. Coincidence? Or something worse? Then, in the far corner of the room, there was writing on the wall, a child's handwriting, shaky and uneven. It said, "I am still here." The silence that followed was deafening. Ramirez took a step back, his flashlight trembling. "Ethan, someone's been here recently." We heard a noise then, faint, metallic, echoing from down the hall. We followed it, slow and careful. The deeper we went, the colder it got. Then, inside a locked chamber, we found something that made my blood run cold. A chair bolted to the floor, restraints on the arms, medical monitors still plugged in, and on the wall beside it, photographs. Dozens of them. Each one was of me. From childhood to adulthood, different years, different places. Ramirez cursed under his breath. "This isn't possible. These photos are recent." That's when a voice came from the shadows. Calm, confident, aged, but unmistakably sharp. "It's possible," it said. "I made it possible." We turned. There he was, Dr. Harold Crane. His hair was gray now, his face older, but his eyes burned with the same eerie intelligence. He smiled faintly. "Eden, 0 when you survived." My heart slammed against my ribs. You did this to me." He stepped closer, hands behind his back. "You misunderstand. I created you. You and the others were the beginning of something extraordinary." "Extraordinary?" "I spat. You stole lives." Crane tilted his head slightly. "You call it theft. I call it progress. Humanity fears what it doesn't understand." Ramirez raised his weapon. "Step away from him." Crane didn't flinch. "You won't shoot, because you're more interested in the truth than justice." Then he looked at me again. "Do you know why you survived the accident, Ethan?" I froze. "What are you talking about?" He smirked. "That crash should have killed you, but it didn't. Because your body isn't ordinary. We modified your cellular repair response. Your system regenerates faster than the average human's. You are proof that Project Eden succeeded." My breath caught. "You're lying." He stepped closer. "Am I? Why do you think your injuries healed weeks ahead of schedule? Why do you think your mind remembers fragments you've never lived? You are adaptation incarnate." I stumbled back, shaking my head. "No, I'm not your experiment." Crane's expression softened almost tenderly. "You are, Ethan. You always were. And so is your brother." The world stopped. "My what?" He smiled wider. "Eden, 0 didn't die. He thrived. And he's been waiting for you." Before Ramirez could react, a figure stepped out of the darkness behind Crane, tall, lean, and wearing a medical mask. When he removed it, I saw my own face staring back at me. Same eyes, same scar, same confusion turning slowly into recognition. Crane whispered proudly, "Meet Adam, the original, the firstborn of Eden." The air seemed to collapse around me. My knees went weak. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. Adam looked at me for a long, silent moment, then said quietly, "We were never supposed to meet." The more I stayed in the hospital, the more I began to question my own memories. They didn't feel solid anymore. It was as if my childhood had been a film reel cut and reassembled by someone else. Every time I tried to remember a birthday, a school, a neighbor, the image flickered and vanished. The doctor said trauma could erase parts of memory, but this felt manufactured. There were entire years that didn't feel like mine at all. Margaret, the woman I now knew was my biological mother, brought photo albums every day. She'd sit beside me, her fingers tracing each old photograph, whispering my real name, Ethan Miles. In one photo, I was a laughing toddler with curly hair, standing on a beach with my father, a man named Jonathan Miles, a journalist who disappeared while investigating illegal adoptions in the early 2000s. When I asked her what happened to him, she froze. Her eyes dimmed and her lips trembled. They said he drowned while covering a story abroad, she murmured. But after what I've learned, I'm not sure he ever made it to the airport. Her voice cracked on the word, ever. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every beep of the heart monitor sounded like a clock ticking down to a truth I wasn't ready for. Around midnight, Detective Ramirez came back, holding a file so thick it looked like it carried the weight of several lives. He laid it gently on my bedside table. Ethan, he said quietly, we found something new. I braced myself. What is it? He flipped through the file until he reached a photo, a faded image of my supposed parents, younger, standing outside a clinic. The sign above them read, Eden Research Institute. I frowned. Is that where Project Eden came from? Ramirez nodded. It started as a fertility research program, but behind the surface, it was a front used to traffic newborns and alter adoption identities. Jonathan Miles, your father, was one of the journalists investigating it. 2 months later, he went missing. I swallowed hard. So, my fake parents worked for them? Worse, he said. They were founders of the program. You weren't kidnapped by chance, Ethan. You were taken as leverage. The room fell silent. The sound of the air conditioner, the faint squeak of hospital shoes in the corridor, everything blurred into static. Leverage? For what? Ramirez continued. Your father's report was never published. He was closing in on names, and the people running the project panicked. They needed insurance in case he exposed them. They took you. My throat went dry, and when he vanished, they erased everything. Ramirez said, your records, your name, your bloodline, gone. You were reborn as Daniel Ward, son of 2 strangers. You became a ghost wearing a borrowed life. For a long time, I didn't speak. I just stared at the wall, at the faint reflection of myself in the hospital window, a man who looked alive, but whose entire existence had been stitched together from lies. Finally, I whispered, so I wasn't stolen because I was special. I was stolen because of what my father knew. Ramirez looked down. Yes, but now that truth can finally come out. He handed me a flash drive. This was recovered from one of the old Eden servers. We believe it's your father's final report, the one they tried to bury. My hands trembled as I took it. I could almost feel my father's fingerprints through plastic. The man I never got to remember. The man who risked his life for the truth. The next morning, the hospital allowed me to use their old laptop. Ramirez and Margaret sat beside me as I opened the drive. There were hundreds of files, documents, audio notes, photos. But one folder stood out. Final Testimony JM. I clicked it open. The screen filled with a single video. My heart raced as I pressed play. A man appeared, tired eyes, unshaven, sitting in a dimly lit motel room. His voice was calm but urgent. If you're watching this, then I didn't make it. They've taken my son. They said it was for the good of science, but I've seen the truth. They're trading lives, replacing identities, creating families on paper that never existed. The Eden Project must never expand. Stop them, whoever you are. Stop them before they rewrite humanity itself. The video ended abruptly. Margaret covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Ramirez swore under his breath. I just sat there, numb. My father had died trying to stop a machine that stole children and built illusions, and I was the proof it succeeded. That night, the truth hit me harder than any accident ever could. I wasn't just Ethan Miles, the kidnapped boy. I was the key to exposing a network that had buried hundreds of stolen identities. But truth comes at a price. And before sunrise, I'd find out just how far they were willing to go to silence it. After watching my father's final video, sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes. A man's voice shouted my name, the sound of tires on wet pavement, the reflection of a syringe, a door slamming shut. It wasn't just memory, it was returning. By the third night, even the hospital began to feel unsafe. Strange things started happening. My medical file disappeared from the front desk. A nurse I had seen every day suddenly no longer worked there. And at 2:17 a.m., the fire alarm went off, except there was no smoke, no fire, no reason. Detective Ramirez arrived within minutes, his hand already on his gun. "We need to move you," he said, "now." They transferred me to a private clinic outside the city under a fake name. For the second time in my life, I was hiding behind an identity that wasn't mine. Margaret followed, refusing to leave me again. I could see the years of pain etched in her face. Yet she carried herself with the strength of someone who'd already lost everything once and wasn't willing to lose it again. "Ethan," she whispered one morning, brushing my hair like she used when I was a baby. "They took 30 years from us. Don't let them take the rest." I nodded, but the fear never left, because somewhere out there, the people who had built the Eden Project were watching. One afternoon, Ramirez returned with an update. His usual confidence was gone. "They're still operating," he said grimly. "Different name now, Aurelius Foundation, but the same network. New faces, same game." He laid down a printed report. On the top page was a photo of a building I recognized instantly. Glass towers, modern architecture, the same logo etched on the hospital equipment that had treated me after the accident. My blood ran cold. "You mean—" He nodded. "Yes, they were funding your recovery." I stared at the walls, at the sterile white ceiling that suddenly felt like a trap. All this time, I thought I'd escaped them, and yet I had been lying in their care again, watched, monitored, studied. "Why me?" I whispered. "Why steal me after all these years?" Ramirez hesitated. Then he said, "Because you're the only surviving subject of Eden Phase 1. You're proof their identity modification worked, and that's what makes you dangerous." I could barely breathe. "So they want to finish what they started." He looked me in the eyes. "No, Ethan. They want to erase you, before anyone connects the dots." That night, I made a decision. If they wanted to silence me, I'd make sure the world heard my voice first. With Margaret's help, I copied every file from a flash drive. My father's report, the Eden documents, everything. We sent it to 5 different journalists, 3 human rights groups, and a lawyer who specialized in missing persons cases. By dawn, the story had begun to spread. A headline appeared on a small investigative blog. "The Eden Files, the human cost of a hidden adoption empire." Within hours, larger outlets picked it up. The world was beginning to ask questions, but exposure came with a price. The next day, as Ramirez drove me back from a follow-up check, a black SUV tailed us. At first, we thought it was nothing, but then it accelerated, hard. "Hold on," Ramirez shouted. The car swerved as the SUV rammed our rear bumper. Metal screeched. The world spun. When I opened my eyes, I was upside down. Glass everywhere. Ramirez slumped against the airbag, blood running down his temple. I heard doors opening, footsteps approaching. Someone pulled me out through the broken window. Cold hands, rough grip. Then a voice, low, calm, chillingly familiar. "You should have stayed lost, Ethan." Before I could respond, a syringe pressed against my neck. Darkness rushed in. When I woke up, I wasn't in the clinic anymore. White lights above me. No windows. No sound except the faint hum of machines. A metal tag on my wrist read, Subject 01 EM. I was back where it all began. Only this time, I wasn't a child. And I wasn't helpless. The first thing I noticed when I woke up was the smell, antiseptic and cold metal. The same sterile air I'd breathed decades ago, back when I was just a child trapped in a lie. I was lying on a narrow bed, wrist strapped, tubes running into my arm. My throat was dry, my head pounding. The The tag on my wrist still read Subject 01 EM. They hadn't even bothered to hide what I was to them. Not a person, not a patient, just a project. Footsteps echoed outside. 2 voices, one male, one female. No one's supposed to know he's alive, the man said. And yet the world knows his name now, the woman replied. We can't erase a story that's already written. The door slid open. The man who entered looked older, his hair gray. But I recognized a voice instantly, the same one from that night on the road. He smiled thinly. Ethan Miles, or do you prefer Daniel Ward? I imagine it's confusing to live as 2 men at once. I stared at him, my voice barely a whisper. Who are you? He walked closer, adjusting his white coat. Dr. Lucien Voss, founder of the Eden Project. The name made my stomach twist. Ramirez had mentioned him once, a biotechnologist who disappeared 20 years ago after being accused of human trials. He stopped right beside my bed. You weren't stolen, Ethan. You were chosen. Your DNA carried unique markers, resistance to neurological conditioning. You were the perfect prototype. I clenched my fist against the straps. Prototype for what? Replacing human lives. He smiled, almost proud, for preserving them. We began by reassigning abandoned children into stable environments. But governments saw potential. They funded identity reallocation. Soldiers, diplomats, test subjects, new names, new faces, new lives. I glared at him. You mean kidnapping? You mean destroying families? Voss's eyes glinted coldly. Sacrifices, Ethan. Every evolution requires them. Your father didn't understand that. He called it exploitation. I call it salvation. My voice broke. You killed him. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he sighed. Your father refused to let go. He tried to expose us. I tried to reason with him, but others took matters into their own hands. Rage surged through me. The strap strained as I pulled, every muscle trembling. You took everything from me. I shouted. My name, my childhood, my father, and now you want to finish the job? Voss leaned closer, his voice lowering. You don't understand. We built you to endure. You survived 30 years in a false life without breaking. That makes you extraordinary. But now, you're a threat to what we built. I can't allow that. He turned to the woman by the door. Prep the memory wash. Begin erasure sequence at 0300 hours. She nodded and left. As he walked away, I whispered, You can erase files, you can bury stories, but you can't kill truth. He paused briefly, then left without looking back. Hours passed. The lights dimmed. Machines hummed. My wrists burned from the straps, but I didn't stop pulling. Somewhere deep in me, something awakened, a pulse of survival my father had left behind. I remembered his final words in that video. Stop them before they rewrite humanity itself. I wasn't just his son. I was his unfinished work. The door opened again. A young nurse entered, avoiding my gaze. She looked nervous, her hand shaking slightly as she checked the forward drip. You don't belong here, she whispered. I stared at her. Help me? Her eyes darted toward the cameras. If they catch me, I'm dead. I swallowed. Please. My father died for this. Don't let his fight end with me. For a moment, she hesitated, then slipped a small key card under my blanket and walked out without another word. The moment the hallway fell silent, I worked the card against the wrist straps. One snapped loose. Then the other. I tore the four from my arm, blood spotting the white sheet. The alarms didn't go off. Not yet. I slipped into the corridor, barefoot, the key card trembling in my hand. Rows of glass chambers lined the walls, each one containing a person, sleeping, breathing, labeled with tags just like mine. Subject 04 Yell. Subject 07 JR. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. A ghost factory. And I realized then I wasn't the only life they had stolen. At the end of the corridor, I found a control room. Monitors displayed live feeds of patients, files, brain scans. One screen caught my eye. It showed Ramirez. He was alive, bruised, handcuffed, but alive in another room. I scanned the console and found a drive labeled Eden_mainframe. My father's work had started this war. Now I would end it. I plugged in the flash drive he'd left behind, the one that carried all his data, and began an upload. The files merged, red warning messages flashing across the screen. Unauthorized access detected. Data transmission active. A siren blared. Red lights flooded the hallway. Guards stormed in. I ran. Feet pounding. Alarms screaming. The nurse's voice echoing behind me. This way. We reached the exit, but Voss was already there, blocking the path. He held a gun, his calm unbroken. "Ethan," he said softly, "walk away. You think you've won, but all you've done is expose the world to truths it isn't ready to handle. They'll destroy you for it." I took a step forward. "Maybe, but at least I'll die myself, not as someone you created." His hand trembled slightly. For a second, I saw fear, the fear of a man whose lies were finally cracking. Then Ramirez appeared behind him, somehow free, a gun in his own hand. "Drop it, Voss." Voss turned, and for the first time, he hesitated. That moment was all it took. I hit the emergency release beside the door. The system burst into chaos. Gas hissing, lights flickering. We ran through the smoke, the nurse beside us. Behind us, the Eden facility burned. By sunrise, everything changed. The files had gone public, transmitted automatically before the servers collapsed. The world finally saw the truth. Governments denied involvement. Agencies scrambled for damage control, and Dr. Lucien Voss disappeared into the shadows once again. As for me, I stood on a hill overlooking the smoking ruins. Margaret at my side. Ramirez survived. The nurse vanished before we could thank her. Margaret took my hand. "You're home now, Ethan." I looked at her and smiled faintly. Home feels like something I still have to build. She nodded, tears glistening. "Then build it for him." I looked at the horizon, where the sun bled gold through clouds. A new morning for a life finally reclaimed. Maybe the world will forget the name Ethan Miles again someday. But not the story, and not the truth, because some ghosts never fade. They just learn to live among the living. It's strange how silence feels different when you've earned it. For years, I feared quiet moments. They made me feel hollow, like the world had forgotten me. But now, silence feels like peace. The kind that doesn't erase pain, but accepts it. 6 months have passed since the fall of the Eden Project. The world has changed in ways I couldn't have imagined. The files I leaked became global headlines for weeks. News anchors called it the greatest child identity scandal in modern history. Governments opened investigations. Hospitals were raided. Hundreds of missing children, some already adults, were identified and reunited with their real families. For the first time, I wasn't just a survivor. I was proof that truth, even when buried for decades, can still breathe again. I live quietly now, far from the city. The media stopped calling months ago. Margaret, my mother, moved in with me. Some days, we talk about everything we lost. Some days, we talk about everything we still have. I've started keeping a journal, not to remember what happened, but to remind myself why it happened, to keep my father's voice alive between the pages. Sometimes at night, I walk to the edge of the hill where I can see the old ruins of the Eden facility. Nature has started reclaiming it. Vines crawling over the concrete, trees piercing through broken glass. It feels poetic, in a way, like the earth itself is erasing what men built on lies. Ramirez visits sometimes. He's different now. The department offered him promotion, but he turned it down. He says he's working with a group that tracks identity laundering networks across borders, Eden's ghosts, he calls them. He laughs when he says it, but I can see the fire in his eyes. And then there's the nurse, the one who helped me escape. Her name was revealed months later. Clara Jones. She disappeared before any investigation reached her. Some say she changed her name. Others believe she was taken. But sometimes when I get mail from unknown addresses, simple notes that say, "Keep telling the truth," I like to think it's her. One evening, Margaret handed me something I hadn't seen since the hospital. The silver bracelet, the one she kept for 30 years. It still had the tiny engraving. "EM." She smiled through tears. "I think it's time you wore it again." I slipped it onto my wrist. It felt cold at first, then warm, as if it had been waiting all this time to come home. Do you ever wish we could go back? I asked her. She shook her head softly. No, because now, when I look at you, I see everything we survived. I see proof that love can wait 30 years and still find its way back. Her words sank deep into me. For the first time, I realized something. I wasn't living to reclaim my past anymore. I was living to honor it. The world eventually moved on. The headlines faded. The investigation slowed. And people found new stories to follow. But for the ones like me, the children stolen, renamed, reborn, the scars remain. We carry them quietly, not as pain, but as memory. Because memory is the only thing they couldn't erase. And if you've ever felt like the world forgot you, like your story doesn't matter, remember this. Sometimes the loudest stories come from the quietest survivors. Today, I visit my father's grave for the first time. It's a simple stone by the ocean, the same beach from that old photograph. The waves crash softly against the shore, the wind carrying the scent of salt and forgiveness. I kneel down and place the bracelet on the sand beside his name. Dad, I whisper, I found her. I found the truth. And I finally found myself. The waves reach forward, touching the silver just once, then retreat like a blessing. I smile, not because the pain is gone, but because I finally learned to live with it. The boy who was lost twice is finally home.